I moved into a small apartment a few weeks ago. I was 34 and just lost my job as a graphic designer. The place was cheap, in a rundown area. I thought it would be a fresh start. I tried to make it feel like home, even with the peeling paint and narrow hallways. At first, things felt normal. I set up my furniture piece by piece. The place was quiet, and I was excited to be on my own again. But on my first night, I heard something next door. It sounded like muffled voices. Maybe the neighbors were just moving in late. I brushed it off and didn't think much of it. But then things changed. I started to notice strange noises. One evening, I heard rattling at my door. I thought it might be a draft at first. My heart started racing. It felt unsettling. I glanced at the hallway. It was empty, full of shadows and flickering street lamp light. A few days later, I noticed muddy footprints outside my door. I was sure they didn't belong to me. I hadn't even stepped outside. My stomach dropped. I wiped them away with a paper towel and felt cold. It was like someone was watching me. Nights grew odd after that. I came home one evening to find my couch against the wall instead of in the center of the room. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't understand how someone could have come in while I was gone. Had I done that and just forgotten? It's hard to say. I kept hearing bumps and whispers through the thin walls. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there, always watching. One night, I lay in bed when I swear I saw a shadow slip past my bedroom door. My heart raced as I lay still, staring into the darkness, feeling paralyzed. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? Someone's in my apartment, but I can't prove it? It sounded crazy to me. I kept trying to tell myself it was nothing, that I was just stressed about being unemployed. But something kept clawing at me. Who was in the building? What did they want? I never found answers. The question stuck with me even after I left that place. I moved out, but I still sometimes feel those shadows following me. Then one night, I settled into my new home. I glanced in the mirror, and for just a split second, I saw a shape behind me. I quickly turned, but no one was there. My heart sank. Maybe I brought something with me. I don't know, but I can't get rid of it. All I wanted was a fresh start, but now I can't shake the feeling that something else came with me. I look over my shoulder often, wondering if I'll see that shadow again. It's unsettling, and I don't know how to make it stop. The next day, I decided to get out of the house. I needed some air, something to distract me from the shadows that seemed to linger. I wandered into a small cafe down the street. The aroma of coffee wrapped around me like a warm blanket, but I couldn't fully shake the feeling that I was still being watched. As I sipped my drink, I noticed a woman sitting alone in the corner. She kept glancing my way. At first, I brushed it off as my paranoia, but then I caught her staring at me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. I shifted in my seat and focused on my phone, but I could feel her gaze. When I finished my coffee, I stepped outside. That's when I spotted something out of place. My old apartment building was just a few blocks away, and as I passed it, I noticed a figure lingering in the doorway. They stood there, shrouded in a hooded jacket, almost completely still. My heart dropped. Could that be someone from my past place? I quickly ducked into a nearby shop, panic bubbling in my chest. My mind raced with questions. Did they follow me? I couldn't risk finding out. I waited for what felt like an eternity, peeking out now and then. The figure was still there, flicking their gaze around. It felt like they were searching for someone. Finally, I mustered the courage to leave the store. I decided to take a long way home. As I walked, I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting to see that figure tailing me. But they were gone, at least for now. When I arrived home, I felt the weight of the day dragging me down. I stepped inside and immediately felt uneasy. The quiet was thick, almost suffocating. I thought about contacting a friend to talk it out, but I felt embarrassed.
How could I explain this to anyone? After a shower, I attempted to shake off the tension of the day. As I reached for my towel, that sensation of being watched came back full force. I turned slowly, peering into the dimly lit living room. Everything looked normal, but a nagging thought hung over me. What if I wasn't alone? I tried to distract myself with a movie, but every rustle from outside made my heart race. And then I heard it, soft tapping, almost like a finger drumming against the wall. It was so subtle, yet it pierced through my concentration like a knife. I froze, my eyes darting around the room. That feeling, that weight on my chest, I couldn't take it anymore. I mustered all my courage and decided to investigate the noise. I tiptoed toward the source, my breathing shallow. The taps grew louder, matching the frantic beat of my heart. Finally, I reached the wall and pressed my ear against it. That's when I heard it clearly, a voice whispering.
I felt a chill run down my spine. I wanted to back away, to run, but my feet felt glued to the floor. I was terrified, trapped in my own home. That's when I saw the shift in shadows across the wall, a darker shape moving closer. I stepped back, adrenaline surging through me. I was not alone anymore. I stumbled back, trying to comprehend what I was seeing. The shape hovered in the dim light, slowly morphing into a more defined silhouette. My breath quickened, and I needed to get away, but my feet wouldn't cooperate. Then, without warning, the whisper stopped. The silence was worse, like the whole room was holding its breath, waiting. I finally forced myself to move. I turned and sprinted for the front door, adrenaline coursing through me. I flung it open, nearly slamming it against the wall. As I dashed into the hallway, I realized I should have thought this through. The hallway felt exposed, like a spotlight on stage. I glanced back toward my apartment. The shadows inside danced wildly, a reminder of whatever I had just escaped. But I couldn't return there, not now. I raced down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. As I burst out of the building, I hit the cool night air and looked around, trying to collect myself. But I knew I couldn't stay where I was. The cafe, perhaps. It felt safer than my own home. I walked quickly, my breath shaky, and every sound made me jump. The streetlights flickered overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to slink alongside me. I reached the cafe, its warm light spilling onto the sidewalk like a welcoming presence. I stepped inside and sank into a booth far from the door. The barista barely looked up as I ordered a coffee. I needed to clear my head, to plan. I couldn't ignore the figure at my old apartment, or that voice. What had it said? I forced myself to breathe slowly, hoping against hope that this was all just a bad dream. That's when I spotted her again, the woman from the cafe. She was sitting at a small table in the corner, watching me intently. My skin prickled. I quickly averted my gaze, pretending to check my phone, but she was still there, her eyes burning into me. What did she want, and why was she everywhere I went? I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew something, something that could explain the figure, the voice, and my growing sense of dread. I stood up, panic rising again. I needed to confront her before I lost my nerve. But as I approached her table, the air felt thick with tension. "Do I know you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "You should be careful," she said softly. "What do you mean?" My voice trembled. Before she could respond, the lights flickered and then went out. Completely. Darkness enveloped the cafe. I could hear muffled gasps around me. The only sound was my heart pounding in my ears. Then I felt a cold breath on my neck. Someone was standing right behind me. I froze, the chill racing down my spine. I could hardly think as fear took hold. My instincts screamed to run, but somehow my feet were glued to the ground. The cold air wrapped around me, and I could feel the weight of another presence inching closer. "Hello?" I managed to whisper, my throat dry. The darkness seemed to swallow the sound, and I had no idea if anyone else could hear me.
The tension in the cafe felt thick and suffocating. I was acutely aware of the faint rustling of clothes and the shuffling of uneasy patrons. The woman in the corner, the one who had warned me, she was still seated, her figure outlined against the faint glow of the exit sign. I wanted to run to her, to get her help, but my instinct screamed at me to stay put. Without warning, a hand gripped my shoulder. I gasped and turned, ready to lash out. But it was only the barista, his face twisted with confusion. "You all right?" he asked, his voice low. The lights flickered back on with a sudden snap, illuminating the cafe once more. Relief washed over me, but the dread didn't dissipate. Everywhere I turned, people were glancing nervously around, their faces pale. It was like we were all in on an unspoken secret. The woman remained in her seat, her eyes still on me. I felt an odd pull toward her, like she might have the answers I desperately craved. "Why are you here?" I exclaimed, almost more to myself than to her. She stood up and walked toward me, moving gracefully through the chaos, like she was unaffected by the tension that hung in the air. "You shouldn't have run away. You're being watched, and it's not just in your apartment." "What do you mean?" I asked, gripping the edge of the table for support. "Come with me," she urged, pausing to glance at the barista, who remained focused on the other customers. "I can explain, but not here. They can sense fear. It makes it worse." The barista shot me a look, still confused, and I could feel sweat pooling at the back of my neck. Anxiety clenched my stomach. "What if I don't want to?" I countered, my voice wavering. "You don't have a choice," she insisted, her gaze lingering on the entrance as if waiting for something or someone. "They're already on their way here." My heart raced. Who's they? But before she could respond, the back door of the cafe swung open with a creak. A group of shadowy figures stepped in, their presence heavy like a storm cloud. It was unexpected and jarring. They scanned the room, and my breath caught in my throat as their eyes landed on me. Panic surged through me as I felt the room close in. "Run!" I shouted, my instincts kicking in. I lunged for the exit, but the woman caught my wrist, holding me back. "It's too late for that," she said urgently. The figures were already moving closer, their intentions unclear but menacing. That's when I realized this was bigger than my apartment or a strange figure. This was something far darker, and we were at the center of it. The figures approached, their features shrouded in darkness. My heart thudded wildly in my chest as I struggled to pull free from the woman's grip, but she held firm. "Listen to me," she hissed, urgency bleeding into her voice. "They're not here for you, at least not yet." "What do you mean, not yet?" Panic threatened to swallow me whole. I could see their eyes glinting in the low light, cold and calculating, as they picked apart the cafe's terrified patrons. "We have to get out of here," she insisted, scanning the room. Her composure was unsettling, given the chaos unfolding around us. Just as another customer began to scream, the barista stepped forward, his hands raised. "Hey, there's no need for—" One of the figures lunged towards him, a blur of shadow and menace. My stomach twisted as I heard the barista's strangled cry. I couldn't watch. I turned away, nausea rising. "What are they doing?" I whispered, rage and fear bubbling within me. "They'll find what they're looking for," she said, eyes darting back to the entrance. "Come on." With one strong tug, she pulled me away from the table, guiding me toward the back of the cafe. I stumbled, glancing back one last time, just as one of the figures started to approach the woman, their expression hidden behind a hood. I barely had time to register the barista being pulled into the shadows of the night before we slipped through a narrow hallway. The air grew colder as we entered the staff area. It was cramped, filled with boxes and equipment. "You shouldn't be here," I said, breathless. I still couldn't fully process what was happening, but I was beginning to understand the danger. "They're hunting," she replied, her voice steady. "They'll find us if we stay too long." "Who are they?" I pressed, desperate for answers. I felt the walls closing in, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on me. They are collectors. They hunt people who see the truth. And once you see, there's no going back. Her revelation sent a shiver through me. The truth about what? She opened a door leading outside, her eyes glued to the cafe. We'll talk when we get away from here. I hesitated at the threshold. I was still shaken. What about the barista? Their priority is you now. Trust me. Before I could protest further, she pulled me through the door into the alleyway. The faint sounds of muffled chaos drifted behind us, quiet, but the fear gripped tightly
to my throat. We rushed down the alley, blending into the shadows, and I felt the push of urgency as she led us deeper into the night. My mind raced with what she had said. I was part of something larger than I could comprehend, something dark enough to draw these figures toward me. Then a quick flash caught my eye up ahead, a glimpse of a face in the alley, shadowy but familiar. That's when I realized I had seen them before. I stumbled in surprise. The face that emerged from the darkness was unmistakable. It was Jace, my childhood friend. The boy with messy hair and a goofy grin now looked older and more serious, cloaked in an air of urgency. My mind raced as I processed what I was seeing. "Jace?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. The woman strong-armed me forward, and just as I was about to chase after him, she grabbed my arm again. "Who is that?" she asked, her voice low. I could see a flicker of concern in her eyes. "Just someone I know," I exclaimed. "He can help. He must know what's going on." I tried to break free from her grasp, but she tightened her hold. "He could also be one of them," she warned. "We can't take that chance." "Why would he be?" Confusion bubbled to the surface. My chest felt tight. "He's my friend." "Right now you don't know who your friends are," she said sharply, pushing us further into the shadows. "We need to keep moving." I felt the weight of her words sink in. Friends could be foes. I couldn't let the truth of this sink in too deeply. I had to focus. The figures from the cafe were creeping into my thoughts, incidents of my own past swirling in a hazy mix. Each flash of that hooded figure felt like a knife in my gut. Without warning, a loud crash echoed from the alley behind us. I froze. The woman quickly pulled me to a black van tucked away in a narrow drive. The sliding door was flung open, and she hustled me inside. The interior smelt like leather and something metallic. "No," I protested as I heard shouts and footsteps near us. "That's Jace. We can't just leave him." "Trust me," she said again, her voice firm. "If you're seen, they'll come for you next. No one can be a hero right now." With a sickening thud, a figure slammed against the side of the van, and I flinched. The woman frowned, reaching for something beneath her jacket. "Get down," she urged. I ducked just in time, peeking through the tinted window. Jace was cornered, staring at two figures blocking his path. My heart pounded as I watched him shift uneasily, hands raised as if trying to reason with them. "Please don't hurt him," I breathed, feeling helpless. The woman's eyes shifted to the rearview mirror, her expression darkening. "If they've seen his face..."
"We can't stay here. They'll follow us wherever we go." Before I could respond, she threw the van into gear and sped off, leaving the chaos of the alley behind. I stared out the back window, my heart heavy as Jace's figure disappeared from view. "Where are we going?" I asked, panic rising. I had a million questions swirling in my head, but one rose above the rest. What about the truth? She looked over at me, and for a moment her mask of urgency cracked, revealing a flicker of compassion. "I'll explain everything once we're safe," she promised, but I could see uncertainty in her eyes. That's when I noticed the door to the back of the van wasn't fully shut. It hung wide enough to offer a glimpse outside. And suddenly I realized someone was following us. I could see the silhouette of a black SUV tailing us, its headlights cutting through the night like sharp knives. My heart raced. The reality of the situation crashed over me like waves. Someone was after us, and they had no intention of giving up. "Is someone behind us?" I asked, my voice shaky. The woman's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror again, and her jaw set tight. "Stay down and don't say anything," she instructed, her tone brokering no argument. Every fiber of my being screamed for me to fight back, to grab the door and fling myself into the night. Not knowing if Jace was safe was tearing me apart. But I didn't need to make things worse. I had to trust this woman, at least for now. She took a quick turn onto a narrow street, the tires screeching in protest. The SUV followed, but hesitated momentarily. I could hear the engine roaring louder as it accelerated to close the gap. My stomach sank. What do we do? "Just keep your head down and don't move. I'll take care of this," she replied, steeling herself. We sped through darkened streets, passing flickering streetlights and vacant storefronts. Time felt stretched, each second dragging on as the SUV continued to shadow us. I wanted to scream at the woman, demand her to pull over so I could help, but panic strangled my voice. Suddenly she swerved hard, veering into an alley. The van jolted as the tires hit a pothole, sending a jarring shudder through the frame. But the woman seemed unfazed as she slammed on the brakes, bringing the van to a screeching halt. I raised my head cautiously, peeking through the small crack of the van door that still hung open. The black SUV skidded into the alley, its headlights illuminating the walls like prison bars. I felt a wave of nausea come over me. They were right behind us. "Think they saw us?" I whispered. "I don't know, but we can't stick around to find out." She reached for her jacket again. "You stay put. I'll draw them away." Before I could protest, she tossed me a small device, a black rectangle with buttons. "If things go south, hit that. It's a tracker. We'll regroup." I swallowed hard. "But now," she snapped, urgency lacing her voice. With that, she slipped out of the van and disappeared into the shadows. I clutched the device tightly, my hands trembling. My heart pounded in my chest, and I peered out once more. I could barely make out the figures climbing out of the SUV. They were dressed in dark clothing, moving with an ease that put my teeth on edge. This wasn't just a random chase. They meant business. I felt trapped, a prisoner of fear. My mind raced as I thought of Jace. Worst-case scenarios flashed before my eyes. Was he okay? Did those men catch him? Then everything went dark. The lights from the SUV cut out, leaving the street in a frightening blackness. I was alone in the van, the silence suffocating. My instincts screamed to make a choice, but all I could do was stare into the darkness, grasping the tracker like a lifeline, hoping I wouldn't need to use it. Just then, there was a loud crack. My breath hitched as I heard footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. It was only a matter of time before they found me. I held my breath as the footsteps drew closer. Every sound echoed in my ears. I was sure they could hear my heart pounding. The darkness felt alive, pressing in around me. I gripped the tracker, wishing I could disappear. Then a shadow loomed outside the van. I squinted through the tiny opening, trying to make out the figure. I could see the outline of someone moving. They paused, scanning the alley. My stomach twisted into knots. This was it. I was about to be discovered. I heard a voice, low and menacing. They must have gone this way, split up and checked the area. Panic surged through me. I pressed myself into the corner of the van, holding the tracker like it was a secret weapon. I could barely breathe. If they started looking inside, there'd be nowhere left to hide. The footfalls moved away from me. My eyes darted to the rearview mirror. The SUV was now just a dark shadow at the end of the alley. I couldn't tell who was approaching, but I couldn't just sit there forever. I had to make a decision. As I shifted to listen, my heart sank. There was a crashing sound, something heavy hitting the ground nearby. The men had started their search. They weren't just hunting for a van, they were hunting for me. I glanced at the tracker, wondering if I should activate it. The woman might have a plan, but if I hit the button, would she even find me in time? My thoughts raced. With careful, deliberate motions, I leaned closer to the door. The alley was still dim, but I could see two men now. One was rifling through a nearby dumpster, while the other peered
into a dark corner. I needed a distraction. Just then, I remembered the flashlight on the dashboard. I hesitated, then quickly turned it on and pointed it toward the alley entrance. The sudden beam cut through the dark, illuminating the ground. "Hey!" one of the men shouted. "Over here!" My heart raced. I had caught their attention. For a brief moment, they forgot about the van. They both rushed towards the light, leaving the van momentarily unguarded. This was my chance. I pushed the door open quietly and slipped out. My legs felt like jelly, but adrenaline kicked in, urging me to move. I dashed toward the other end of the alley, praying I wouldn't trip in the dark. Behind me, I heard shouting, "Check the van!" They were closing in fast. I picked up my pace, heart pounding. I hit the corner just as their flashlight beam swept back towards me. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath, praying I wouldn't be spotted. Suddenly, the tracker's device in my pocket beeped. I cursed silently. I had to get far enough away to regroup. That's when I spotted a fire escape on the building to my left. My only option was to climb. Without hesitating, I sprinted toward it. Just as I grabbed the ladder, I heard footsteps rushing toward me from behind. I climbed, hand over hand, praying the rungs held. I didn't dare look down. My breath quickened with every step. I was terrified they'd catch me before I could escape. Then, through the darkness, I heard a voice below me. "They're on the roof!" I froze. They were already onto me. Climbing higher wasn't enough. I needed to find a way to disappear completely. And then, everything went dark again. This time, the sounds of the city faded. I looked up to see a figure emerging from the opposite side of the roof. I couldn't tell who it was, but they were just as determined as I was. I had nowhere left to run. I took a step back, heart racing as the figure advanced. Shadows danced around us, masking any details I desperately wanted to see. Anxiety twisted my stomach into knots, making it hard to breathe. Were they friend or foe? "Who are you?" I managed to whisper, trying to keep my voice steady. The figure paused, silhouetted by what little light there was. They seemed to assess me, but I couldn't decipher their intentions. "Stay quiet," the figure said, their voice low but urgent. "They're hunting you." I swallowed hard. My mind worked full throttle. That's what I feared. I wanted to trust this person, but I had learned the hard way not to take anyone at face value. Before I could respond, a bright beam of light flared to life behind me. The men from the alley had climbed the same fire escape, and their voices echoed across the rooftop. "Check over there! We can't let them get away!" My instincts kicked. "We have to move," I urged, glancing at the stranger. They nodded, and together we ducked behind a ventilation unit, the cold metal pressing against my back. "What's your plan?" I asked, anxiety creeping into my words. The figure held up a hand to silence me. "We wait for them to pass, then we'll find a way down." Their eyes were sharp and calculating. I tried to read their expression, but they kept their face hidden in the shadows. Minutes felt like hours as we listened to the men's voices get closer. Each word brought a fresh wave of panic. "Damn it, where did they go?" one of the men cursed. "They can't have gotten far." I whispered to my companion. "Do you know these guys?" "A little too well," they replied, their voice barely above a whisper. The tension on the roof was palpable. I shifted my weight, trying to keep my body relaxed. Just then, I felt the tracker vibrate in my pocket again. I cursed under my breath, praying it wouldn't give us away. "Do you have a plan?" I asked again, urgency creeping into my tone. The figure hesitated, then said, "We need to jump down to the next roof, but it's risky. I won't let them catch you." I felt a flicker of hope. "Okay, let's do it." Just as I prepared to follow, the footsteps approached our hiding spot again. I could see the beam of their flashlight sweeping over the roof, searching for movement. The tension snapped like a tightened wire. "Come on," I hissed, glancing at the figure. They nodded sharply.
We sprinted toward the edge of the roof, the sound of our footfalls overshadowed by the men shouting. My heart thundered as I leaped, landing awkwardly on the neighboring roof. "I don't see them," one of the men yelled, rushing past where we had just been. For a second, I felt relief, but it quickly evaporated when I realized we weren't out of danger yet. That's when I noticed something glinting in the moonlight below. A street lamp illuminating a small alley where a dark figure lingered. The figure seemed familiar. My gut twisted. "Wait," I said, squinting into the light. "I know that person." As I took a step closer, the figure turned, and everything clicked into place. That face filled me with dread. I had unknowingly stumbled into much deeper trouble than I'd ever imagined. "Who is it?" my companion whispered, urgency back in their voice. I didn't answer. My mind was racing, and the dread sank deeper. I had to make a choice now, and every second was ticking away. I needed to act fast. The figure below could either be my way out or my doom. Thoughts of Jace filled my mind. He was still out there, and I refused to let his face fade from memory. I took a breath, steeling myself against the fear curling tightly in my chest. "It's Jace," I whispered, the name surprising me.
As it left my lips, "I can't just leave him." "What if he's one of them?" the figure urged, voice steady but edged with panic. "Then it's too late," I said. "He's already seen me." Without waiting for a response, I moved closer to the edge of the roof, gauging the distance. "Don't," my companion hissed, but I was already climbing the ledge. The adrenaline surged, determination overriding the doubt. The stakes felt impossibly high, but I had to know, had to believe Jace could still be on my side. I leapt down, landing softly on the ground. Instinctively, I crouched low, scanning the shadows. Jace was still there, and he didn't seem to have noticed me yet. His eyes darted about nervously, but he wasn't surrounded by any of the figures. "Jace!" My voice cracked as I called his name, fear illuminating the path more than the ambient light ever could. He turned sharply. "Is that really you?" he shouted back, relief forming lines across his face. "What the hell is going on?" "Can I trust you?" I asked, urgently stepping closer. The familiar warmth of friendship mingled with an undercurrent of unease. "They're after me, and they might come for you, too." He swallowed hard, glancing at the shadows, fear creeping back into his expression. "I found out a few things. I've been trying to help people like you. You need to get out of here." "Help? What do you mean?" But before he could respond, the dark figures from the cafe appeared at the alley's entrance, their silhouettes cutting through the echoes of the city. My heart dropped. Time was running out. I had brought them here. "I'll explain everything later. We need to move," Jace urged, grabbing my arm, and we ran down the alley, heart racing. "There's an old building we can hide in," he said, glancing back. "It has an underground entrance." We rounded a corner and sprinted toward a decrepit warehouse, its door hanging loosely on its hinges. We ducked inside, finding a cramped space with rusting machinery and debris scattered everywhere. The air felt stale and heavy, but we didn't have much choice. "Do you think they saw us?" I whispered, already feeling the tension settle over us like a blanket. "I don't know," Jace replied, breathless, "but we need to stay quiet." We found a spot behind some old crates and huddled together, listening. Outside, the voices of the figures grew louder, searching. Silence hung between us as the footsteps echoed nearer. I glanced at Jace, his face pale but resolute. "What do they want?" I hissed, desperate for answers. "They're collectors," he said, his voice barely above a murmur. "They hunt down those who have seen the truth. They'll stop at nothing until they find you. You're—" A loud crash interrupted him as one of the figures broke a window. The sound sent a jolt through me. I clutched the tracker in my pocket, contemplating whether or not to activate it. Could still feel the weight of uncertainty around us. "Jace," I croaked, "I don't know how I got mixed up in all of this." He looked at me with intensity. "That doesn't matter right now. What matters is survival.
We need to find a way out." "Where is that woman?" I found myself asking. "She's my contact," Jace frowned, glancing toward the entrance. "I thought she could help, but clearly they're on to us." "Then we need to move again," I said, my mind racing. I felt on the brink of something profound, yet impossible to grasp. "Let me check the back," Jace suggested, glancing nervously at the movement outside. As he eased himself away to scan the situation, I watched, heart pounding. Was he telling the truth about everything? I couldn't shake the feelings of distrust building again. The stakes were too high. A loud bang erupted from the entrance we had just come through. I jumped at the noise, adrenaline pumping through my veins. "They're here!" I shouted, retreating further into the shadows. Jace turned, panic fulminating in his eyes. "We can break through the side. There's a gap," he insisted, pointing. We dashed towards it, just as ominous shadows swept into the warehouse, sweeping their beams toward us. I felt my breath hitch. Then I made the choice. Without thinking, I activated the tracker, feeling a rush as its soft glow illuminated the dim surroundings. "Now," I called out, and we pushed through the gap, ducking into an alleyway bathed in darkness. The cold air rushed past us, and I could hear the faint echoes of frantic footsteps behind, sounds surrounding us in a claustrophobic embrace. The night swallowed us whole, and with every step, uncertainty danced on the edges of our vision. The shadows were still out there, and the question lingered: how long could we outrun the truth? As we slipped further into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't merely a flight for survival. It felt like I had just stepped deeper into a web, one that was far more tangled than I could ever have imagined. And as we bolted forward, I found myself wondering if I could ever really escape the shadows watching from the outside, waiting for the moment to pounce.